President and Founder, Airterra. George Wojciechowski, Co-Founder, Manifest Commerce, with Jessica Binns, Managing Editor and Technology Editor, Sourcing Journal.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the last panel of the day. I just wanted to go around and do a quick intro with our three panelists here. But before we get to that, just a reminder to submit your audience questions in the chat box for the Q&A at the end of today's discussion. So let's go around and do a quick intro. Brian, let's start with you and just give us your name, title, and the company you work for and what you guys do.
Yeah, my name is Brent Beebout. I'm the president and founder of Airterra. Airterra is a new startup in the personal delivery space. We've been around for about a year and a half right now. We're going live this past summer, and we are out there helping mid-size and smaller retailers compete against the bigger players for the e-commerce last mile delivery.
Great. And George, over to you.
Yeah, my name is George Wojciechowski. I'm CEO and co-founder of Manifest Commerce, which is based in Austin, Texas. We are a D2C and B2B e-commerce fulfillment company. And we do full e-commerce fulfillment in a sustainable way. So what that means for e-commerce brands is that we've done the hard part of reimagining the fulfillment process to make it more sustainable. That allows brands to have green their supply chain and do their fulfillment in a sustainable and earth-friendly way.
Awesome. And last but not least, Brian.
My name is Brian Adams, CEO, founder of Retail Reworks. We do corrections and inspections, and we also are a returns processor. So we help brands, DTC brands, and other brands to make sure that if the numbers work right, that we help to reprocess their returns so that they can go back into the chain.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you for that. So it goes without saying that we've seen a lot happening with omnichannel in the past 18 months in the pandemic. A study in April from the Retail Industry Leaders Association, along with McKinsey, found that 2/3 of survey respondents said that omnichannel was their biggest opportunity and also their biggest challenge. So what do you see as the biggest mistake that fashion retailers are making right now as it relates to omnichannel? And what are some of the ways that they can course correct to recoup their costs? Now, Brent, let's jump in with you.
Okay, so there's lots of ways you can actually get rid of your margin on omnichannel. It's a new space for a lot of folks. But I would say the two biggest trends I've seen the last year and a half are the amount of inventory people are bringing into their stores as well as their fulfillment centers. As many of you know, omnichannel is a whole different ballgame. And the fact that you need a very sophisticated inventory planning process and decreasing the amount of inventory you bring in is key to keeping your top line and bottom line solid going forward. So I think that's the biggest thing right now is the amount of inventory folks are bringing into their networks. The second one, which is kind of a hot trend, is kind of the ship from store movement. Everybody said that ship from store is kind of a panacea for solving their omnichannel needs. The problem is it's a pretty expensive pick. It's a pretty expensive fulfillment process. And so ship from store is not a panacea for everybody, depending on your price point. If you're shipping something very inexpensive, low cost underwear, for example, ship from store may not be the right answer. But if you're shipping Gucci purses, it will definitely be probably a good answer for you. So at the end of the day, ship from store is not a one size fits all. And there's a math answer for each and every retailer out there to decide if it works for them.
Awesome. Now, George, what do you think about this?
Yeah, it's an unprecedented macro environment right now in supply chain and logistics and e-commerce. I think the biggest mistake that brands can make is approaching peak season Q4 the same way they have in previous years. I think you have to be a lot more tactical this year. You need to be on your numbers, understand performance channels, how SKUs are performing, and what your all-in costs are, including fulfillment. And one of the things that we like to do with our clients prior to peak season is go through the math and find out, okay, well, if you're working these, 1, 2, 3 strategies, this is what the math is going to look like for your business. And in a season in which people are still waiting for inventory to arrive, they have purchase orders that are 2, 3, 4 months behind. It's going to be very important to be smart, to try to see what's working, try different strategies, see what's working, and when it is working, double and triple down on that strategy.
Absolutely. Brian, can you weigh in?
Yeah, sure. I've kind of been I've only ever worked for myself, so I've always had my own business. And what happens is that I always kind of use my own money. And so cash flow is always very important to me. And so when I got into this business, I realized that, there was a whole world that at one point it was all about growing the top line. But these people, just as Brent says, they've got to make money. And just as George said as well, you got to know your complete landed cost. And of the experience that I've seen, most of these people come in to the market as designers or models or into fashion, and they're not, exactly, wonderful counters would be the right word. And it's very, very hard to count complete landed costs of what it costs all the way through. And when you know that, you can then make really good decisions, but it's really, really hard to figure out what that number is. That number includes the not only the unit cost, but the shipping from overseas, the land when it comes to a person like George, where it's fulfilled, picked, packed. Shipping is unlike phones. When you buy a phone now, you can call anywhere in the world and it costs the same cost. So whereas shipping is changing. So when Brent says, shipping from stores, that might make sense for people to come and pick it up. But you just have to know what your number is, because I've seen here recently a lot of people don't know what their numbers, and all of a sudden it hits them like a ton of bricks and they go, oh, we're not making money.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, echoing Brian, I've seen a lot of the same in the sense that merchants previously have they've looked at their business in really simplistic ways, and they haven't really deep dived into the data. If there ever was a time to deep dive into the economics of your business, from the place where it's originated to how it gets sent out to the returns process, this is the time to really understand and know those numbers. Otherwise, you may think you're doing great, and then you find out in January or when you audit, Q4, that wow, this missing this blind spot resulted in losses that you didn't think were even occurring.
So Jessica, we just had recently a customer, and I went out to California and spoke with them, and they were selling T-shirts, and we were banking all the T-shirts to then, keep them fully sustainable. And I'm also in the recycling business. We recycle tires and plastic and make boards, so I understand how hard it is to manufacture. But I went out and told them, I said, you realize how much that landed cost to me is. You should just let the customer have it. It does, when you further, ship it to me and go further on and on, you're just losing more money.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's actually on that sort of topic about losing money and sustainability. So George, what your company does at Manifest Commerce is offer a sustainable logistics platform and a solution to what we've seen in the industry for decades now. So can you tell us a little bit about the cost comparison versus a traditional logistics platform, and how can users essentially justify and absorb these expenses, especially with e-commerce going gangbusters right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Jessica, and thank you. I think that's a common misconception, and it's one that I bought into for many years with my previous company, which was also a D2C logistics company. But it's simply not true. So, when my partners and I went about creating Manifest Commerce, we were all very well versed in the business of fulfillment, and we knew how things were done in a conventional way. And we took the approach of looking at every step of that process and finding a sustainable solution so that chain is sustainable from the moment that product arrives within our warehouse to the minute that we ship it out and it gets picked up by UPS, FedEx, USPS at the end of the day. And the truth is that the costs for a lot of the products and the materials and the equipment isn't any more expensive than it is for to be sustainable than the conventional. For example, we've been able to successfully source recycled boxes, recycled corrugate, which is curbside recyclable, poly mailers made from corn, hemp, and other natural materials that could also be recyclable. We don't use any plastics in any of our fulfillment centers. There's no plastics in the picking, packing, and shipping process. And I've spoken with manufacturers of equipment from everywhere from Asia to South Carolina to California. For a lot of the stuff that's used, the corrugate, the polymailers, it doesn't necessarily cost more to produce those sustainable materials over the conventional stuff. It's just that everybody's always asking for the conventional stuff, so the cost of production scaled out is going to be cheaper. But if more people and more brands and more merchants start asking for these types of materials, the costs are going to be the same, if not lower. And so I think that it's forgivable in our current environment where everybody is so busy trying to keep up with demand to not see these opportunities to be more sustainable and to build a business that encompasses an environmental and a social mission as much as it does creating a product that creates delightful utility for your end customers. So to answer your question, Jessica, we send proposals to businesses on a daily basis, and our costs are in line with the rest of our competitors in the fulfillment industry, and we're the only ones doing it sustainably. So I think it's a misconception that just because I'm going sustainable means my costs are going to be X% higher. There might be slight differences, and there's opportunities like carbon offsets to share a little bit of the profit that you make to do good. But I think in the end, what we're finding is that a lot of merchants don't just want to build businesses that allow them the independence of the monetary independence that comes with it, but they also want to build businesses that they're proud of and a legacy that they can be proud of.
Absolutely, and that becomes sort of a marketing conversation at a certain point too, because you want to tell your customers 100%. About what you're doing for good. Now, Brent, let's get back over to you. Your company was acquired by American Eagle this year, and that was a pretty significant development in the industry. So what does that say about how seriously retailers are taking the issue of the last mile and omnichannel right now? Do you see retailers getting tactical and strategic with how you're running how they're running omnichannel operations?
Yeah, great question. So, what we're seeing here, I've been in business for around 20 years now in e-commerce, and I've really seen it grow and move. What I've seen, especially as Chief Supply Chain Officer over the last, say, dozen years, is it's really a barbell effect. What we're seeing is the rich kind of getting richer and the poor kind of getting poorer. And so what's happening is you get economies of scale with Amazon, with Walmart and Target, for example. They're getting tons of economies of scale. They're really starting to win the omni-channel e-commerce race, where mid-sized retailers, smaller retailers, and even digitally native brands are starting to lose that game. They just don't have the economies of scale. So what's happened over the last couple of years is that I think people are starting to realize if they don't band together on the back end of their businesses, we're talking about small and medium-sized retailers in particular, but they don't band together, they're not big enough to ever compete again against Amazon and Walmart as they take more and more market share. So what was been a heresy 4 or 5 years ago, if I made that statement I just said, is now actually starting to be embraced by some of the forward-thinking leaders and CEOs of mid-sized and smaller retailers. And American Eagle is one of those. Jay Schottenstein is pretty much known as an innovative leader in the retail space, the CEO of American Eagle. And the idea of Airterra, of using economies of scale and banding together the back end of their businesses to get economies of scale, he sees that as the future. Not only does it lower AEO's cost of doing business because you're getting those economies of scale, it also increases their transit speed, which makes them more competitive against Amazon and Walmart, who have more fulfillment centers, et cetera. So at the end of the day, the trend that's happening out here, I think AEO is just on the front end of that, is that to compete against the big guys, the front end retailers can compete all they want on service and selection and price and what have you, but on the back end, they're going to have to become frenemies and actually combine their resources in the back end to allow them to be competitive against the big guys going forward. And that's the genesis of the purchase that happened a couple months ago.
That's a great word for it, frenemies. Now, Brian, I think this is actually really relevant for what your company does. You talked about making returns into even a more valuable product. Can you explain a little bit more about how that works?
Yeah, sure. It's math, right? So just as Brent said, if you know your cost, our objective is to do one of two things. It's either to make the returns more valuable than purchasing new. But there's a lot of instances where it doesn't make sense, right? And so then we have a next life kind of process. But there's a lot of sense where, it makes more sense to put it full circular if the cost of reworking the return is less than the cost of purchasing in something new. which is, and the problem is that that cost is ever moving, right? So, the cost of shipping, I make a product overseas and the cost of shipping has gone up nearly 7 times, and so you have to know what the per unit landed cost is at the return when it's returned. And at that point, you can make a good decision. Is it better to move that as the next life or put it right back into the circle? And, like Brent is saying, we want to connect with brands. We want to connect with 3PLs to be able to help minimize that cost. People don't realize what the per unit cost is. And that's why these DTC brands, what is it, like 87% don't make it past 5 years? And that reason is very simple. They don't know how to count. And when you know how to count, you can make really good decisions.
Well, can you offer maybe some specifics about how you can help brands,
Sure.
rework a product, for maybe a new season, for a new inventory?
Yeah, so we've developed a software that allows them to be able to X out certain SKUs that you only want certain items to be reworked. But at the end of the day, if that item landed to me, if that item cost them $10 to bring over new, and by the time with its soft cost, it's $22, it's more economical for them to buy it new. But if the reverse is, and it's cost $22, and by the time it gets to us, it's $10, you want to rework that item and put it back through the chain again. And so, our goal is to, the first thing I ask is when we deal with companies, are you in the business to make money? And, if they're in the business to make money, let's go find religion real quick and go find your soft costs. And when we can do that, I can tell you if we can help you be able to make more money and improve your cash flow. Because, people don't realize is that when you go borrow money or go get private equity money, that's just dilution to these guys. And we want to help these DTC brands make more money or utilize their cash flow. Because look, if the return rate is say 30% and you buy 100 units, I can find a much better way for you to go waste your money than to not sell 30% of something. Yeah. And so, that's where our value comes. And if the math doesn't make sense, we can't help you. But then that goes back to why, just like Amazon and Target and Walmart, a lot of things they're not having them return. They say, hey, give it to your neighbor. And, that's a sustainable way, but they can't, Amazon and some of these really large companies, they have a whole group of people, all they do is analyze the variable cost. Everyone knows what the fixed cost is. Very few people know what the variable cost is, plus the fixed cost to be able to find full landed cost.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would agree with everything that Brian said, Jessica, and he's looking at it from a macro perspective, which needs to be conventional wisdom in the e-commerce space right now. And I just wanted to mention that there's a couple things you can do on a micro level as well. For example, look at your sales channels. Hey, if I'm paying a referral fee to Amazon for the sales there and my margins are 18% of those orders, why keep that up when I can go to this other marketplace or other channel and get a higher margin and increase my investment in that segment? Or even when it comes to fulfillment, hey, I'm going to do the math and find out if I have my inventory in 2 or 3 locations, how is that going to affect my bottom line at the end of the quarter, at the end of the month, at the end of the week? And so the whole DTC industry, kind of I think what Brian feels as well, and probably Brent too, just needs to start looking at the numbers in a mature way, the way that Wall Street's looked at it forever.
I want to say one more thing. I'll kick it to Brent. He used the word inventory. Okay. And, AEO or American Eagle, they have a lot more money than a lot of these small DTC brands. And so they have credit lines to be able to afford the float of that inventory. But, these smaller brands that aren't able to fulfill, or to order, say, a full container load, they're reliant on their cash flow. And at a macro level, irregardless of what business it is, you want that cash flow to flow in a profitable way. And just like Brent said, that's management of inventory. And he said, omni-channel of, maybe it's from a store. they can only make that decision relative to inventory and how they get to someone if they know what the number is. And I know I sound like a broken record, but it's amazing that it's that simple of learning how to count. But it's hard to count. It's so simple, it's hard.
That's really one way to put it. So let's pivot a little bit and talk about the Super Bowl of retail. We are basically in the holiday season already, halfway through October. Omnichannel has been a really big deal in the holiday in the past several years. Customers like to be able to have the flexibility of shopping whichever channel that they want. And it's even worse this year with all of the port problems and supply chain issues going on. And it's really bad when the White House is having press conferences about it. So what do you expect to see this holiday, and what does that mean for omnichannel? Do you see BOPIS taking a bigger role? Is it going to be curbside? Is it going to be shipped from store? Let's start with you, Brent.
Yeah, so I never knew that supply chain would be sexy, but as you said, the White House made it so it's kind of an interesting year. So I think there's two big trends that are happening for this peak season, this holiday season, and they're opposing forces. The first one, which has been front page of the news lately, is all the ships sitting off Long Beach and all the inventory coming from overseas is stuck. It's either sitting off the port, or if it's even on the port, it can't get on a truck or train and eventually get to the DCs. So that's kind of the first force that's happening here for the holiday. So inventory is coming in very late, if at all, for the holiday. The second trend here is, assuming you have the inventory and are able to fulfill it and ship it, there's not enough last mile capacity. If you guys saw the recent trend from Pitney Bowes, last year, e-commerce packages were up 37% year over year, to 20 billion packages crossing the United States last year. And there's just not enough last mile capacity in the entire network to get the presents to everybody's Christmas tree in time for the holiday. So what's happening here on these opposing forces is really two things. I'm going to call it either shop early or shop late. The shop early, which you already see the trend on, is because there is limited inventory and limited last mile capacity. Retailers are trying to make the holiday go longer. So they're starting Christmas early because that's a fixed date in the back end. I just saw yesterday on a TV commercial, Walmart's starting Black Friday on November 2nd. That's going to be their online sales day. So which is much earlier than in past days or past years. So Christmas is going to start early, if you will, and shop early because that's where the inventory is if they have it. And I think we're going to have this drought that's going to happen during the peak days of holiday. As inventory starts to run out, stores are going to become a little bit more empty than we're used to, especially between Thanksgiving and Christmas, as things start to sell out from this early Black Friday event that's happening during the month of November. And then eventually that inventory is going to flow in after peak season. So all of a sudden, retailers are going to have lots of inventory when it finally breaks through the ports in late December, early January. So I would expect a fire sale happening in January so they can get this inventory off their books before the new fiscal year happens. So it's going to be kind of a barbell again, shop early or shop late, with a very big trough in the middle of this year.
And just following quickly on that, Brent, you said retailers might be having fire sales on late arriving product. Is there a particular channel within omnichannel that they might be trying to move this excess product through? And how does that kind of ultimately play into the margin question? Yeah,
I would say yes, depending on what business they're in. Obviously, the more they're in fashion or things that go out of style or quickly be obsolescence, like some electronics. I think those are the things that are more likely to be on a fire sale. Or things that are more evergreen, you buy them all year round, those are probably less likely. So it's really those things that have to move because they change fashion or change obsolescence over time.
Mm-hmm. So George, can you weigh in on holiday and what we can expect to see with omnichannel?
Yeah, I really like and appreciate Brent's take on it. I think that was really sharp. I would add to that it's a really complicated, somewhat unprecedented macro environment. Brands should expect the unexpected, have a strategy, and try to stick to that as closely as possible while also remaining flexible. I also think that it's important to stress that whoever your partners are in the supply chain, regular communications before things really kick off, setting expectations, checking, getting their confirmation that they can keep up with the capacity and the demand that you're expecting is going to be important. And if they can't, look at other options, perhaps using 2 different fulfillment centers or distributing the inventory throughout a network. But it's important to have the conversations with your suppliers and your partners and just get a state of things before things really kick off. Otherwise, you make yourself a lot more vulnerable to the unexpected. And Brent's also right. Like my business partner, Jen, just showed me a couple days ago, Amazon and Target already sending out gift guides like on October 12th and October 10th. So yeah, it's going to start earlier than ever. If you haven't had these conversations with your partners, get on it right now.
Absolutely.
And to further throw a wrench in it, the amount of increased percentage of items that are returned.
Yep.
And now you have less inventory. So, where we step in is that we want to be able to refix that item so you can sell it again, so you don't have the inventory challenges. But as Brent says, is there going to be a barbell? People don't realize how much is returned. It's a large percentage and it's growing, really.
So what does the post-holiday season typically look like for you, Brian?
An influx of packages.
And then what are some of the solutions that you've employed to kind of help convert a returned product into something that's saleable again?
So our objective is to do the math project with them, receive the item. We've created a system that we only want to work on things that they're going to sell again, put them, get that return revenue at a rate that they can resell it as fast as possible. So it can go back to a person like George or a DC that Brent has, so they can keep that thing moving as quick as possible. Just like a restaurant. How does a restaurant make money? Turning tables over or charging a lot for that one table.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the relationship between omnichannel and loyalty. I think we saw during the pandemic and during the early days of it, certain retailers that had never gotten into BOPUS before were suddenly rolling out BOPUS and curbside. Under Armour comes to mind. Chico's does as well. Is there a way that retailers and brands can employ omnichannel as a loyalty play? Let's start with you, Brent.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, omnichannel really is a loyalty play because you're engaging the customer by definition the way they want to be engaged, as opposed to telling customers how we're going to engage with you. I think that's the voice of the customer and finding out do they really value BOPUS, buy online, pick up in store? Do they value other apps, whatever the way they want it? I think that voice of the customer is absolutely crucial for retailers to survive going forward. That is the advantage of omnichannel. So it's a super product for loyalty on the front end of the business. It just makes supply chain much more difficult on the back end of the business. So I think that's the kind of word of warning there. But give customers what they want. It really is a great loyalty thing.
Absolutely. And Brian, do you have a perspective on this?
Yeah, George and I have talked. There's a connect. So in another life, we compete against wood. In a product where we take recycled tires and recycled plastic, and we make boards, and we compete against wood. But the problem is that product costs about 8 times the cost of wood. And so now these manufacturers have been able to make environmentally friendly products that are, say, 20, 30% higher than the alternative. Well, there's a connection there between people. And I think as we get kind of more and more that, there's a loyalty that is kind of bound together by ideologies. And, George is in the business. He got in the business basically to play on that niche. I mean, there's a whole world that is very sensitive to that kind of, against fast fashion would be the word, and so I think loyalty comes in a bunch of different ways, loyalty also comes with, what the logo is on the front of your shirt.
Or what that represents, for sure.
And George, sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Jessica.
I was just going to ask, do you think that sustainability could be a loyalty play for a company like you? Do you think consumers are looking for recycled product and recyclable packaging, things like that?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I didn't bring any facts with me today, but I've seen tons of different studies that show that actually means to customers how sustainable the brands they're buying from are. And if anybody's curious, hit me up, and I have tons of this research somewhere in my laptop. But I think where companies go wrong is they assume a lot of these issues don't matter to their consumers. And I think one of the best things that customers can do is express the mission, the purpose behind their business, just beyond creating products and delivering utility, and bringing the customers in on that, involving them in that mission, so that they can not only wrap their purchase habits around that mission and support it, but their hearts. And when you have a happy customer who's an enthusiastic fan of your brand, that happy customer is going to add up to another happy customer and another happy customer. So it's a really great way to create an audience, to create a tribe or a following around a shared goal or a shared vision, beyond just creating a product and selling it and customer getting the utility out of that product.
Yeah. Just one comment just to make on top of George there, that I've seen in many retailers. It's kind of beware what the customer tells you what they think they want. They might tell you they want sustainability, BOPUS, or whatever the case may be, which may or may not be true. I found a lot of times retailers that I've worked for have gone down a certain path and decided the customer said that's what I want to do. In reality, it's not what customers actually wanted. So my recommendation there is try lots of shots on goal. Try and see what really does stick, what customer really resonates with customers. And then if you find that, then go with it. So that's what it's kind of a little word of warning for folks as they go down the loyalty path.
Yeah.
So Jessica,
go ahead.
So Jessica, one of the things that really is kind of rang true to me, maybe Brent and I can relate to this more than, but when you used to want to be famous, you had to walk across the stage at David Letterman or Jay Leno. That's how a lot of these people became famous. That doesn't exist anymore. Now it's through the connection of social media, through influencers. And so, people get connected to things and that's what they become loyal to. And it's not just one way that loyalty is created. Loyalty is created in all different sectors, in all different niches, and all different, facets. And, magnet happens in a bunch of different ways. And it's now there's more magnets out there. There's not just, David Letterman and Jay Leno.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I would say the same. I'm on the same page as Brent and Brian. People want to see themselves or the potential of who they can be or what their world might look like in the products that they're buying. So there's an opportunity there to establish a relationship, and that relationship equals stickability for brands.
And ultimately, it means dollars, which is what we're all about. So we have time for our audience Q&A, and I saw a question come in since we're in the last 5 minutes here. So this is kind of open-ended for everyone. Do you think we're going to start seeing brands and retailers start charging for shipping and returns? Because obviously shipping's been kind of free across the board for a lot of companies right now. So, George, what do you think? Will
brands start shipping or charging for returns? I think for D2C, small to mid-sized D2C brands, they kind of sort of have to at this point. As better solutions and entrepreneurs like Brian work on better solutions and help clarify the math for them, we're going to see those costs baked into the product on the front end. But right now, there's just so much competition that people are afraid to, one, they don't know their numbers, like Brian pointed out. So they don't even know what to upcharge to build that into the price of their product. So I think for the short term, it's inevitable that they have to. But as the spotlight continues to go on to returns and finding out optimal solutions for it, like shipping was 4, 5, 6 years ago, where free shipping was something only Amazon did, we're going to start to see that worked into the models on the return side.
Got it.
I view it as a couple of ways. Number one, you can't compete now unless you get free shipping. It's just a perception. But number two, people like Amazon require brands to have certain levels, and it's very hard because you have to use the cash to be able to have the inventory level to maintain the levels that they have. But I think the thing that's going to change the most is that everyone hears the stories of in the back in the day when Nordstrom's guy brought in a tire and they exchanged it, or you could wear a pair of shoes for 7 years and you brought them and you could exchange it. And we see all these customers, and irregardless, they exchange. I think that grading is going to become much more prevalent, that you can't just wear something for 4 years and get full refund. I think there's going to be a secondary market where there's like new and used clothes sold on a website, but I don't think that you can wear something for a year, return it, and get 100% return of your cash. I don't think that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
Brent, what about you?
I agree with George and Brian. They hit the nail on the head. I think it's going to be free shipping for the big boys that can afford that cash right now. Everyone else is going to have to make their customers pay for it. And I agree with the grading comment that Brian said. at the end of the day, as Nordstrom size are kind of a one-off, but everyone's going to have that grading thing. And I think at the end of the day, because people are more sustainable or sustainable conscious, that there's going to be that recycling of clothes and shoes, et cetera, down the road. So that definitely is a trend going forward.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. Well,
not to overuse go ahead. I just wanted to mention, Jessica, like these solutions have to happen.
Right.
Not to overuse the word sustainable, but e-commerce in its current state with the velocity that we're experiencing is unsustainable, both for the planet and just for business. And so it's going to be really interesting over the next year or two as new solutions come to market and people find better solutions to conduct business and more efficient solutions to conduct business.
Well, let's hope you're not alone in doing sustainable logistics. Well, we are out of time, so we have to wrap it up and end right there. Brian, Brent, and George, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.